Hi everyone, welcome. Up until 2 weeks ago, I had some European night crawlers living in these three buckets over here, these yellow buckets that are numbered 3, 4, and 5, but it seemed to me like those systems were nearing their end and that separating the worms from their castings while they're still living in there was going to become a chore, so 2 weeks ago we moved these little guys over, along with the labels that were on their buckets, into this one bigger size bus box. And we initiated the migration of the worms out of their finished castings over into that horizontal migration feeding zone. And there have been 3 occasions on which I've come in here with my squirt bottle to make sure that the feeding zone is nice and damp and cozy, and then also to give this material over here a good aeration, stirring it up, moving all the stuff that's had a chance to dry off the surface down into the lower area and bringing up the more damp stuff. And the stuff does seem to be gradually drying. There was one other time when we came in here to recruit some worms for a special mission, and that was just a very short appearance of this system when we recruited worms out of there. Today I want to just do a check-in and my aeration of the system, but there'll be no haul out today because I know that the castings are still pretty loaded with worms, but we will add to the food that was placed in there 2 weeks ago to make sure that that's plentiful and enough to keep them going. So I'm going to put a glove on, get the system up on the bench, and we're going to get started. I've got more of the same sort of stuff that was used to build the horizontal migration feeding zone 2 weeks ago. More cantaloupe and more banana peel. I would think that the majority of this stuff has probably been eaten by now. I've also got a couple soiled napkins here that I thought we can also possibly build out the bedding with, now that we've probably got a fairly nice turnout developing over here. I mean, I've been pretty good about resisting the temptation to look in here, basically. Other than that little peek that we got in there together when we recruited worms from here for that special mission, I've not really had a chance to see what's going on in here as far as worm turnout. But before we do that, let's get a sense of how many worms are still occupying the vermicompost over on this side. Now, I think the third check-in might have been as recently as yesterday. It could have been the day before. I'm starting to lose track of time. I can't remember exactly when it was, but I know there had been 3 check-ins of this system off camera, at which time I would simply aerate all this material out here and then grab my spray bottle to make sure the horizontal migration feeding zone was nice and cozy. I mean, it did always feel to me like it had plenty of moisture in there anyway, but I would add more anyhow, regardless. But let's see how things look. I mean, this doesn't look anything like it did when I first came in here for the first aeration and check-in, off-camera check-in. This stuff was loaded with worms, tons of worms everywhere. And each time that I would come in here to submerge all the dry stuff I found out here on the surface, blending it in with the more damp stuff below, and at the same time surfacing all the damp stuff that I found down below out to the surface to give that a chance to dry. It seemed like at each check-in I would always find fewer and fewer worms in here, telling me that worms making their way through this system, traveling back and forth, exploring, looking for good opportunities for feeding and comfortable bedding. Well, any ones that have made their way over into our horizontal migration feeding zone have probably been quite satisfied with what they found over there, because my guess is that most of them are actually remaining over there and not coming back out into this stuff. This stuff is just becoming more and more depleted of any sort of nourishment, more and more depleted of any moisture, and eventually it'll become unbearable for the worms. But since it happens slowly, it feels to me like it's really up to the worms and their tolerance for this stuff to decide when they're ready to find a BBD, bigger and better deal. I don't remember what movie it was, but I remember a movie, was it Hot Dog? that ski movie? The Bigger and Better Deal. Or was it Revenge of the Nerds? I don't recall. Wow, we got a nice little collection of worms hanging out right here on the corner. Trying to sneak around our little partition wall. Same thing going on over here too. Every time I do this, I feel so stupid for kind of nudging a bunch of worms back out into the vermicompost when I'd really prefer to see them go to the other side of the partition over into the feeding zone. So I'll try to be careful about not doing any more counterproductive moves like that. But all right, we've I think we've done a pretty good job aerating the vermicompost, but when we level things off and we backfill back onto our little partition, we'll have another chance to stir the stuff up a bit. I did actually entertain the idea of maybe coming in here with a replacement divider. And this is really not meant to divide anything, because you'll see it's punched full of holes, giving the worms ample opportunity to find their way through it. And they can always find their way under it and, you know, around the side of it. They'll find their way to where they want to be. I've even used partitions like that were solid with no holes in them, and the worms found their way over into the feeding zone no problem. So this will be my first real examination of how this feeding zone's progressing. So let's see how things look, and then at the same time we're going to be able to build this out a little bit using a little bit more fresh bedding material, which will be the napkins that I bought down here. We'll dampen everything nicely, and we'll plop in the yummy foods that I bought for them, and that'll just reinforce the encouragement to get more and more worms that are still hanging out over in the vermicompost to come on over and take part in the fun. So these bits of cantaloupe melon do look like they've been more or less stripped clean of any of the fruity yumminess on it. And as I just pick through different pieces of this horizontal migration feeding zone, I could already sense where the banana peel is. I think that's what I encountered. We might have given them more than one banana peel, so there might be some here. This to me felt like a piece right here too. All very popular, or well, you know what? It could just be a chunk of bedding, because I did want to stick to using fairly large whole pieces of bedding for this horizontal migration feeding zone. I didn't want to have all kinds of tiny fragments of shredded paper and cardboard that would, you know, possibly litter our really lovely castings. So the way I would do that, or at least the way I did it previously, was that I did actually dedicate some stuff to really serving as a little bit of a barrier, just to keep stuff that's in the horizontal migration feeding zone in there, and not let it come out here and contaminate our lovely stuff. And then I've got two more, so we'll plop one in under the yummy foods, and then we'll cap it off with the last piece. Good stuff. Definitely seems like the worms are making their way over here, and the fact that they're staying suggests that we've created a space that they're approving of. So hopefully more of the same continues. Actually, my hope is that as this stuff continues to dry out, each time I come in here and aerate it, it'll just become less and less hospitable for worms to remain in. And at some point in the near future, we'll find that the castings are, for the most part, depopulated, and then we'll start thinking about moving them into their new home, which is just sitting there waiting for them to be introduced. Bins that I built over 7 weeks ago at this point, so their new home awaits anxiously, but we will not launch any new worm bins before their time. I think we'll just wait until the time feels right. So backfilling the The divider partition here, it's definitely lost some height. It doesn't doesn't really come up quite as high as it had in the past over here, does it? I am going to pretty much maximize the height on this side because I do want to get stuff pretty level. I don't want to have all this stuff so thick that it doesn't really have the ability to air out. But then again, you know, I think the only thing that's really bringing dryness to the material that's down low is me blending dry stuff in. So it's not the kind of material that's going to have a tendency to be able to air out. Nothing underneath, maybe a ½ inch deep. Anything under there is already pretty well protected by being surrounded by castings, which are pretty well known for their terrific ability at hanging on to their moisture content. So 2 weeks into the migration, we've already had a minor haul out of worms for a special project, but my aim is to get enough of the population over that I could treat it as the majority and then just do one major haul out, possibly an after kind of I don't know, kind of a cleanup to maybe spread this out at some point, maybe throw a bait box in here and just let some stragglers collect in there, and then we'll be done. But this stuff did start out pretty damp, and it is taking a little bit of time for it to dry, and it would go quicker if I tilled it up every day, I'm sure. But you know, the first one came at day 6, the next one came at day 9, the other one I think was yesterday, day 13. So if I did it more frequently, perhaps we'd be further along, but I'm in no rush. We'll get there eventually. So that's it for the video, everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. All right, everyone. Have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.